fascination with knives, of them fantasizing about inflicting acts of horrific violence against black people.
Skin a black guy, torture and set him alive.
Because none of them admitted to the murder at any point on the shocking racist footage, the CPS decided there was still not enough evidence to take this case to trial.
The reaction of Doreen and Neville was one of real bitter disappointment. They just didn't buy that the CPS really wanted to bring the killers to justice.
And at that, the Lawrences say, right, well, we're going to prosecute them. And that almost never happens.
Somebody murdered our son, and they should be brought to justice for it, and that is all we ask.
In September 1994, the Lawrences launched a private prosecution against 3 of the men, Gary Dobson, Neil Acortt and Luke Knight. It had already been decided that there wasn't enough evidence against David Norris or Jamie Acortt for them to stand trial. It was a desperate move on the family's part.
It was a risk to prosecute it because in those days, at least, an acquittal meant that the individual who was acquitted could never be tried again.
Their case rested on Dwayne's first-hand evidence of the night of the murder and the surveillance footage gathered in Dobson's flat. On April the 18th, 1996, the case eventually came to court. The key witness for the prosecution was Dwayne Brooks. He had only caught a fleeting glimpse of Stephen's killers, but after 3 years he knew that he was the best chance the Lawrences had of securing a conviction.
I had to give evidence, I had no choice. Even though I knew I wasn't in the best frame of mind to give evidence.
The problem was, by that time, Dwayne was in a very fragile emotional state.
He was almost certainly suffering from some form of post-traumatic stress, and he was having to do all this and bear the weight and also the guilt he felt on his very young shoulders.
Under intolerable pressure, Dwayne fell apart on the witness stand, and his evidence was ruled to be inadmissible. The jury never even got to see the surveillance footage.
The blame was on me. It was, main witness changed his story, and evidence of main witness is discredited.
Gary Dobson and the 2 others were acquitted. According to law, they could never again be tried for the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
Today's judgment left the Lawrence family and friends in tears as their desperate search for justice was shattered in a moment.
I don't think what happened today is fair at all. As you can see, my wife is not here today, so you can just judge how she feels.
The public outcry over the case was steadily growing. The Met commissioned another inquiry into the way they handled the original investigation. It was carried out by the neighbouring Kent Constabulary. The result was damning.
We identified something like about 28 what we regarded as significant failings.
For the Lawrences, it only confirmed what they already knew.
The police dragged their feet. They did not search to get evidence, and hence 4 years later, the killers are walking free.
In 1997, Labour swept to power and fulfilled a promise to Neville and Doreen to commission a judicial review into matters arising from the death of their son. It was called the Macpherson Inquiry. It pitted the Lawrences against the Met, a battle that would be played out in full view of the nation.
Wall-to-wall coverage on television, radio, and not just for one day, for several days. It was massive.
The inquiry produced almost daily examples of policing disasters and policing incompetence.
Over 5 months, every aspect of the case was examined in minute detail.
It was like sitting in the stocks. You were just having things thrown at you, and it hurt. Can't believe this is an organisation I've spent 37 and a half years in, being criticised like this.
When it was published, the Macpherson report laid bare every mistake the police had made. Its conclusion was that this investigation had been marred by incompetence, and more devastating still, it accused the Metropolitan Police of being institutionally racist.
Prejudice amongst some officers had led to murderers, the most serious offence, getting away with it.
A finding of Macpherson where he said, if I was a white person, I wouldn't have been treated in that way. And I think that in itself kind of cemented what had happened to me. and acknowledged all what happened to me.
One of the most highly charged moments of the inquiry was when the men that Doreen believed had killed her son walked brazenly through the angry crowd. It was the police, not the 5 suspects who were on trial, but over the 2 days that they were questioned, they were evasive and showed clear contempt for the whole proceedings. This intensified public outrage, and there were ugly scenes as they left.
I watched it from a high window in the building, and you could see the 5 making their way down the ramp and out into the street, and there were crowds on either side being held back by the police, but only just.
After not cooperating with the inquiry, Dobson, Norris and the others then shocked everyone by deciding to appear on The Tonight Show.
Their public reputation couldn't really have been any lower, so I guess they had nothing to lose.
But when questioned by Martin Bashir, they could only fall back on the same rehearsed denials.
I put it to you that you were one of the 5 responsible for Stephen Lawrence's murder.
But that's your opinion.
I put it to you that you were one of the 5. Did you kill Stephen Lawrence?
No, I did not.
Your memory loss, for some people, is very convenient and is basically not memory loss at all. It's hiding the truth.
Yeah, that's what...
It's lying.
Yeah, but I'd like to know where they can get that, interpret that from.
Because
I can't remember. Does that make me guilty?
It came across as self-serving. It came across to some people as even further evidence that, yep, they probably did do it.
The public knew they'd done it, the Lawrences knew they'd done it, but that was no comfort to Doreen and Neville. Their son's killers were still at large, and the mistakes the police had made could not be undone.
You can't turn the clock back. You can't all of a sudden just click your finger and all the evidence are there. So, you know, what chance do we stand?
Doreen and Neville Lawrence had fought for 12 years for justice for their murdered son. Gary Dobson, Neil Aycourt and Luke Knight had been tried and acquitted and were immune from further prosecution. It looked like the end of the road. But in 2005, that was about to change.
The most far-reaching change to criminal law for nearly 800 years could soon be brought in. It's the scrapping of the double jeopardy rule that means a suspect can't be tried for the same crime twice.
If there was compelling new evidence that could not have been available at the time, the Court of Appeal could grant a new trial.
But the investigation had always suffered from a lack of forensic evidence, and it was now considered a cold case. To benefit from this change in the law, it would need a radical new approach.
It's a question of somebody with a fresh pair of eyes and no kind of preconceived ideas and preconceptions, looking really quite painstakingly at all the evidence, all the statements and all the possibilities.
That person was Detective Clive Driscoll, who took over the case in 2006. He didn't believe that the lack of forensic evidence was due to the fleeting nature of the attack.
I always felt that this attack on young Stephen, there was opportunity for contact.
Driscoll was convinced that if there was contact, then the forensic evidence would be there. It just hadn't been found. So he ordered a painstaking re-examination of the suspect's clothing. Since the original tests, forensic science had evolved.
In the mid-1990s, you would use a chemical screening test for blood, and if you got no reactions from that screening test, then you wouldn't use a microscope to look any further for blood. But in our examinations, we went back to items and we examined whole items using a microscope, and that's one of the reasons why we came across evidence that hadn't been found before.
We're now able to analyse microscopic amounts of blood, or even blood that's no longer visible, whereas years ago they would actually need quite a large stain by today's standards.
One of the items of clothing that went under this close scrutiny was Gary Dobson's jacket.
The most significant breakthrough, undoubtedly, was on the 22nd of April 2008, where I was at the 15-year memorial for Stephen's death, standing in St Martin's in the Field Church, when in fact I received a phone call from Mr Ed Jarman telling me of the significant breakthrough, which was obviously blood.